she walked into the saint. Regis covered in blood and helped save the Mafia king. Alessandro Moretti sat alone at the head of a table, while traitors aimed guns at his chest. He was seconds from death when the doors exploded open. Dante came first, cold and lethal. Then Eleanor stepped through behind him, wearing torn silk, carrying a stolen gun, and firing like the bloodline had finally claimed her. She had entered the night as a waitress. She left it as a Moretti. Let us hit pause right here, because you and I need to break down the exact second an absolute kingpin completely loses his mind. Picture this upscale Manhattan spot. Amber lights shining down, and you literally cannot tell the spilled marinara from the fresh blood on the marble floor. Enter Alejandro Moretti, a guy who runs the underworld and fears nobody except his fragile grandmother. This dinner was supposed to be a massive victory lap for a mob takeover, but instead, total emotional meltdown. A terrified waitress leans in, a silver necklace drops from her shirt, and boom, the ruthless boss lady of a crime family is suddenly on her knees, crying and hugging a total stranger. It just goes to show you, no matter how much power you stack up, you can never outrun your own buried trauma. The camera drops down to the street level, because the background always sets the vibe. It is not just raining in Manhattan tonight. The sky is dumping freezing sheets of water, perfectly matching the absolute anxiety crushing our girl, Elelanina. She is 24, but her slumped shoulders scream pure survival mode. She is drowning in massive medical debts for a foster sister who already passed away. The brutal reality that is this concrete jungle is fully designed to break the vulnerable first. She wraps her cheap coat tight and splashes through oily puddles to reach the back doors of Lido, a super exclusive restaurant where the rich pay top dollar to feel safe. Suddenly, that quiet vibe shatters when her manager snaps, "You are late. Stick with me here, because this is where the pure stress bleeds right through the screen." You get to see exactly how the terror of a mob boss totally wrecks normal working-class people. Richard, the floor manager, completely lost his mind the second she walked through those steel doors. The guy was literally dripping with panic sweat. Elelanina tries to explain she is only 3 minutes late because the subway broke down, but Richard is not having it. He frantically fixes his silk tie and hisses that he does not care if the entire city flooded, because table 1 is booked. The kitchen was dead quiet, operating in this terrifying state of hushed panic. It is a harsh reminder that true fear always trickles down to crush the innocent bystanders first. Notice how the camera zooms right in on Elelanina fumbling with her white blouse, her hands literally shaking from the adrenaline. She asks if table 1 is for the Dubai investors, but Richard looks horrified. He whispers that it is way worse. It is the Moretti family. Specifically, Alejandro and his grandmother, and when they show up, the whole floor gets cleared. Elelanina immediately freezes up. Even as a broke civilian, she knows that name belongs to an absolute apex predator. Alejandro is not just some basic mob boss. He is a literal executioner in a tailored suit who took over the syndicate at just 22 years old after his dad was taken out. The brutal life lesson here is impossible to ignore. Snagging that level of ultimate power always comes with a devastatingly bloody price tag. In the 6 years since grabbing the throne, Alejandro has been on an absolute tear, wiping out rivals with cold, calculated genius. He is basically a modern monster hiding behind massive wealth. And guess what? Elelanina get assigned to his table tonight. She is practically begging Richard to give it to Jessica. But Jessica conveniently called in sick, probably because her survival instincts are actually working. Richard shoves a napkin at Elelanina and lays down the absolute rules of survival. Keep your mouth shut, do not look them in the eye, pour the drinks, and disappear. He straight up tells her, if she spills 1 drop, the Mafia guards will end her. It is a terrifying reality check for anyone listening. When you are standing in the room with absolute monsters, pure silence becomes your only real armor. She swallows her panic and nods, but you have to watch her body language here. When people hit maximum stress, they always reach for a comfort object. Her shaking fingers brush against a cold metal necklace, hidden under her shirt. That silver locket is literally her most prized possession, a weeping willow tree wrapped around a cracked blue diamond. The orphanage records say she was wearing it when she was abandoned 22 years ago. It is her only physical connection to a family she never even knew. Honestly, it is a beautiful reminder that deep down, every single one of us is desperately searching for our roots. But before she can process anything, 3 black, fully armored SUVs violently pull up to the rainy curb right outside the window. The predators are officially in the building. The poor valet practically runs away, and you cannot blame him. 4 massive bodyguards step out into the freezing rain, scanning the block like absolute terminators. Then, the boss himself steps out of the middle truck. Alejandro looks like a statue in a bespoke suit, just radiating this insane, quiet threat level. His eyes are built to make you fold instantly. But then, the camera catches the wildest plot twist. For about 3 seconds, all that dark mobster energy completely vanishes. He reaches into the truck with his scarred hands and incredibly gently helps this frail older woman step down into the rain. It is totally wild to watch, but it proves a seriously profound life lesson. Even the most ruthless, untouchable monsters out there have at least one person they humbly bow down to. Do not let Isabella's old age fool you for a second. She might look physically weak, but she holds absolute psychological control over this entire crime family. Wearing vintage pearls and a velvet coat, her face shows the scars of crazy trauma. We are talking about a woman who buried her husband, 2 sons, and had her youngest daughter, Katerina, literally vanish into thin air during the old gang wars. "Keep close, Grandma," Alejandro mutters, his rough voice slicing through the rain. The second they step through the doors of the restaurant, the entire dining room goes dead silent. The rich snobs inside suddenly realize how fragile they really are. It hits hard, because the harsh reality of the world is simple. All the cash in your bank account means absolutely nothing when death physically walks into the room. Let us look at this together, because Elena is completely frozen, her heart practically beating out of her chest. She watches Alejandro set his grandmother up in the velvet booth, like he is claiming a throne. Her manager Richard pops up out of nowhere, shoves a tray loaded with champagne into her hands, and whispers, "Go, and God help you." Honestly, walking over to table 1 felt like taking the longest walk to an execution. She is staring intensely at those thin glass hall stems, absolutely terrified that her shaking hands are going to drop everything. With every single step closer to this Mafia king, the temperature in the room feels like it drops 10 degrees. The undeniable lesson here is that pure, concentrated fear has a really cruel way of freezing the actual air right inside your lungs. Suddenly, 2 massive goons step right in front of her, looking like absolute brick walls with zero emotion. "Let her pass," Alejandro casually says. His voice is ridiculously smooth, but it carries this dark weight that makes the guards instantly step aside. The second Elena enters their VIP bubble, her senses are totally overwhelmed. She smells a mix of expensive cedar cologne and that sharp, metallic scent that always follows a fresh crime scene. "Good evening," she squeaks out, keeping her eyes glued to the table because she is too terrified to look up. She offers to pour their vintage champagne, but Alejandro just hits her with dead silence, staring her down to see what she is about. The chilling truth you need to remember is that absolute power never actually has to raise its voice to be heard. This guy is doing a full-on threat assessment in his head, watching her shaky breathing before he finally just orders her to pour. Elena angles herself to serve the grandmother first, who honestly looks completely checked out, staring into the candle flame like she is trapped in a tragic flashback. Alejandro tries to cheer her up, softly telling her that they finally wiped out the rival mob and secured the docks. But Isabella just gives this incredibly heartbreaking sigh. She tells him that all the blood, money, and territory in the world will never bring back the family they lost or fill the empty chairs at Sunday dinner. It hits so deep. The most tragic irony of life is that people will literally sacrifice their entire souls chasing things they can never actually take with them when they go. You and I have to appreciate this moment, because for a fraction of a second, Alejandro looks completely shattered before his cold mobster mask slams back into place. "I know, Grandma, but it keeps us breathing," he whispers. It perfectly proves the grim reality that surviving a brutal world often means stuffing your deepest wounds way down. Meanwhile, Elena is shaking so badly while pouring his drink. Being this close to a literal killer is short-circuiting her brain, and the chilled bottle is slipping in her sweaty hands. She leans over weirdly just to avoid brushing against his expensive suit. Then, the absolute worst happens. The top button of her cheap work shirt pops off and hits the floor. Guys, the dominoes are officially falling, and there is absolutely no going back after this. Let us pause on this exact frame, because you and I are witnessing the second a whole universe shatters. A slip of her cheap uniform, and gravity takes over. An antique silver weeping willow locket swings free, its cracked blue diamond catching the candlelight. Elena gasps, her face draining of color as she frantically shoves the metal back under her collar. She stammers a panicked apology, bracing to be dragged out by Mafia security. But Alessandro, this volatile crime syndicate kingpin, just freezes solid. No yelling, not a single blink. Honestly, it shows a real truth about life. We spend decades building massive walls to hide our deepest soft spots, yet fate always finds a way to expose our fragile hearts through the tiniest, dumbest accidents. Study the kingpin's reaction here. Alessandro is a ruthless boss who holds the entire city by the throat. Yet his eyes are locked onto this trembling waitress, like a predator seeing a literal ghost. But get this, he is not the one who stops the room cold. It is Isabella. The untouchable crime family matriarch spots that silver locket, and decades of buried grief just detonate. A crystal champagne flute slips from her shaking fingers, shattering loudly against the marble floor. Expensive liquor bleeds into the crisp white tablecloth, dripping right into the dead, heavy silence. You can build a dark underground empire of money and fear, but the life lesson is clear. No matter how much power you hold over other people, your unhealed trauma will always claw its way back, up to the surface when you least expect it. Let's check the shadows. The armed bodyguards instantly reach inside their tailored suits, gripping their concealed weapons. They are convinced a rival cartel just took a shot at the boss. Alessandro violently kicks his chair back, the loud scrape, slicing through the room. He throws his massive frame over his grandmother like a human shield, yelling at his men to lock the heavy oak doors. But Isabella is not under physical attack. She is suffocating on a terrifying wave of pure hope. She starts to hyperventilate, raising one shaking finger to point directly at the crying waitress. It is a crazy reminder for our own lives. We get so used to expecting betrayal and pain from the world that we go totally blind to the actual miracles standing right in front of our faces. We have all tasted that blinding panic, right? For Elena, 1,000 alarm bells are screaming in her head, begging her to bolt for the nearest exit, but her legs feel like pure lead. Isabella chokes out a desperate demand about the necklace, and then the old woman lets out a wail. It is a raw, guttural sound of agony that actually makes her hardened mobster grandson physically flinch. The upscale dining room just flatlines. Musicians drop their instruments. Wealthy patrons freeze, with silver forks hovering in midair. Elena tries to stumble backward, only to crash right into the solid chest of a massive mob enforcer. Let's look at this together. It perfectly shows how deeply fear paralyzes a person. When the moment arrives to run away, terror just turns your bones into heavy stone. The guard clamps a massive hand onto her shoulder, anchoring her to the floor. Watch closely how Alessandro turns his head here. The worried grandson melts away, replaced instantly by the cold-blooded Mafia boss who runs the underground. He steps right into her personal space, towering over her like a dark storm cloud. You heard her. he whispers. His voice is a terrifying, deep rumble that sends ice straight down her spine. Take it out. Elelenina is shaking so violently she can barely grasp the hem of her uniform. Hot tears spill down her cheeks, totally terrified that these dangerous men think she is a petty thief. It is a brutal truth about human nature. We routinely assume the absolute worst is about to happen, punishing our own minds, long before anyone actually drops the gavel. Notice the raw desperation in her voice as she tries to escape a grave she did not dig. She weeps openly, swearing she never stole the jewelry, crying out that it has been around her neck since she was a baby. Alessandro does not blink. He merely repeats the order, his face looking like solid ice. Trembling, she pulls the silver chain over her head, offering the weeping willow pendant in her open palm. The fractured blue diamond catches the light, looking just as sad as the young woman holding it. Suddenly, Isabella stumbles forward, violently shoving her mobster grandson aside. She seizes Elelenina by the hand, her aged fingers locking down like a literal steel trap. It is a painful reality of life. When someone is starving for a single drop of hope, they will hold on to you tightly enough to leave heavy bruises. The camera pushes right in on Isabella. She stares at the silver branches and that shattered blue stone, and you and I can literally see her heart splintering again. A scream tears straight out of her throat. It is a gut-wrenching mix of absolute grief, colliding with unbelievable joy. The sheer volume makes even a hardened killer, like Alessandro, tense his shoulders. It is the unfiltered sound of a grieving mother waking up from a 24-year nightmare. Before Elelenina can even draw a breath, the elderly Mafia boss throws her arms around the waitress's neck. She sobs into the cheap uniform, clinging to the girl like she might evaporate. It teaches us something deeply profound. Time never actually heals a broken heart. It only forces you to wear a heavy mask until something finally comes along to rip it away. My little bird, you came back, the Mafia matriarch sobs. Elelenina remains completely frozen. Her hands hover awkwardly in the air, while this terrifying underground queen weeps against her shoulder. When the waitress nervously whispers that they have the wrong person, Isabella flatly refuses to listen. She frames the terrified girl's face with shaking hands, staring intensely into her bright, green eyes. In that exact second, the brutal truth hits Alessandro like a punch to the gut. Caterina, his beloved aunt, the rebel who ran off with a rival cartel decades ago and paid with her life. Her missing baby left a massive dark void that the family filled with violence. It reminds us of a hard fact. No matter how deeply you try to bury a tragic past, the universe will always find a way to dig it right back up into the light. For 20 years, this crime family believed that child died in a cartel ambush. Watch as the untouchable kingpin completely loses his composure. His heart is hammering against his ribs, so he defaults to the only language he understands: pure aggression. He snatches Elelenina by the wrist, pulling the silver locket from her grasp to inspect it himself. He flips the pendant over, and boom, there it is. Carved into the cold metal is their syndicate motto: family above all, sitting directly above his murdered aunt's exact birth date. Only 4 of these heirlooms exist on Earth, and the chilling math no longer lies. Sometimes we spend our entire lives searching for our purpose, completely unaware that our true identity was already carved in stone, long before we ever took our first breath. That 4th family locket was a ghost for 20 long years. Alessandro slowly raises his head, his eyes locking onto this trembling waitress with terrifying intensity. In his calculating Mafia mind, she is no longer just a random girl. She is a dangerous glitch in his perfectly controlled empire. "Where did you get this?" he demands. His voice drops so low it practically vibrates the floorboards. Between his crushing grip and the insane tension, Elelenina completely breaks down. She sobs that she was dumped at a Chicago orphanage with nothing but the necklace. Instantly, Isabella pulls the weeping girl tight against her chest, glaring at her ruthless grandson like a protective lioness. It proves that a mother's fierce instinct to protect her blood will always overpower any logical fear of the consequences. Can you not see she is terrified? She is your cousin. Isabella snaps, shedding tears over the girl's stained uniform. The tension choking this restaurant is so thick that the night manager actually passed out cold behind the hostess stand. Alessandro just stares in dead silence at this weeping girl wrapped in his grandmother's arms. She is the long-lost Mafia princess, a girl who spent her youth pouring cheap drinks for change. But right then, you can see a dark, possessive switch flip behind the kingpin's eyes. He knows if rival cartels discover she is still breathing, they will hunt her down before sunset. It highlights a tragic irony about human connection. Sometimes the very people who are the most desperate to keep you safe are the exact same ones who end up locking you forever inside a gilded cage. Notice the chilling precision of an underworld boss locking down a major crisis. Alessandro turns to his men with calculated fury. He orders the room cleared, confiscates every single phone, and cuts all the security cameras. The unspoken threat of brutal violence ensures absolute obedience. He calmly adjusts his silver cufflinks, totally masking the raging storm in his mind as he starts mentally mapping out upcoming street wars. "Cancel my meetings," he whispers, his gaze fixed entirely on the traumatized waitress. Within moments, they shove her into a black armored SUV, whisking her away into a terrifying new reality. You and I both know how quickly fate shifts, but this is the ultimate life lesson. Everything you hold true about your life can be permanently erased and entirely rewritten in a single, chaotic afternoon. Let us take a look at this absolute masterpiece of a scene, guys. We have our girl, Elelenina, completely frozen in the back of a heavily armored tank of a car. The days of her stressing out over rent? Gone. Erased. Right next to her, Isabella is clutching her hand like it is a literal lifeline, whispering these frantic prayers while completely losing her grip on reality. And then we have Alessandro up front, the Don himself, a total shadow of pure, unfiltered violence just waiting to be unleashed. The crazy life lesson here is simple. You think you are safe in your boring little routine? That safety is a total illusion. The second a mob boss with enough power decides you belong to them, your entire world goes up in smoke. The only light in this pitch-black car is the cold glare of a phone screen hitting Alessandro's face. This guy is sitting there, carrying an entire syndicate war on his shoulders, literally deciding who lives and who drops dead next. Eleanor is practically suffocating right next to him. She is shaking, begging this mafia boss to let her go because she has a boring shift tomorrow. Alessandro does not even blink. He just casually drops the bomb that her home is totally gone and a hit squad is hunting her. The lesson here hits so hard. We cling to our little daily schedules right when our world gets flipped upside down. We love to think we are the main character, but control is really just a bedtime story we tell ourselves so we do not freak out. You and I have seen a million revenge plots where the villain acts like the hero, but watching Alessandro pull it off is actually insane. The camera zooms in on Eleanor, straight up choking on her own panic. This absolute mastermind completely flips the script, spinning a literal kidnapping into a noble rescue mission. He tells her a rival crime family is sending an entire army to wipe her out. The armored car finally rolls up to a massive stone wall that looks exactly like a villain headquarters. It is a wild reminder about how twisted people can be. The most dangerous people in your life will never walk up to you holding a weapon. They will show up holding a giant shield, lock you inside a heavily guarded cage, and then demand you thank them for keeping you safe. Look at the insane flex of power happening right here. The second these heavily armed guards see Alessandro, they drop their rifles like they are staring at an actual god. These massive iron gates slowly grind open, completely swallowing Eleanor into this giant stone fortress. The car stops, the doors swing wide, and we get hit with the biggest plot twist yet. There is a guy standing at the top of the marble stairs, looking like an absolute menace. If Alessandro is the evil genius of this syndicate, this new guy is his personal executioner. The life lesson here is a brutal one. All that crazy wealth and luxury is usually just a fancy mask, covering up some seriously dark cruelty. A cage made of expensive imported stone and iron is still a cage, and it will slowly crush your soul to pieces. We have got to talk about Dante Corvino. This guy is a walking red flag in a tailored suit, built out of pure violence and rocking a brutal scar down his jawline. Those dead, pale gray eyes will completely freeze your blood. He stares at Eleanor like a starving wolf, sizing up a free meal. Alessandro barks an order about the security perimeter, and Dante coldly confirms the thermal sensors are active. His voice makes Eleanor literally shake in her boots. This is the exact moment she realizes she is fully trapped in a mafia nightmare. The lesson here is simple but crucial. When your gut is screaming that the person standing in front of you is completely empty inside, you better listen. Your body always spots a monster way before your brain ever catches up to the harsh reality. The tension is madness as these two mafia heavyweights start a silent turf war over her. Dante locks his dead eyes on Eleanor, watching her shake. Because this enforcer is a literal weapon, he feels zero empathy, calling her a stray dog, just to mentally break her. But then Alessandro steps right in front of her, blocking Dante in the ultimate alpha power move. He claims she is his blood, completely terrified of losing his new family toy. Dante clenches his jaw, hiding how deeply broken he really is. The crucial lesson here is that when toxic people fight over you, they are just battling their own deep insecurities. You become nothing more than a shiny trophy on a shelf, and sadly, you are the one who ends up paying the heavy price for their completely out-of-control egos. Those heavy doors slam shut like a literal tomb sealing her inside. The whole place is dripping in ridiculous luxury, but Eleanor knows the dark truth. This is a high-tech prison for a crime family. They march her down a creepy, dead silent hallway, right into a blinding white medical room. Waiting inside is Dr. Gable. This absolute sellout traded his medical oath for dirty syndicate money. He stands there looking like a horror movie villain with his sterile needles ready to go. Forcing her into this cold clinical setup totally shatters her will to fight back. The scary life lesson here is how fast authority gets weaponized against vulnerable people. Just because a guy is wearing a spotless white coat does not mean he actually has your best interests at heart when the big money is on the table. Alessandro snaps an order and points at a creepy leather medical chair. Eleanor is completely paralyzed, her eyes darting around looking for any way out of this nightmare. But of course, Dante, the human wall, is already blocking the exit. He watches her freak out exactly like a lion watching a trapped deer. His dead stare alone makes her want to jump out of her skin. She cries and screams that she will never join their toxic mafia family. Then Dante drops the coldest line ever, flatly telling her that biology does not ask for permission. The lesson here is seriously rough. We love to think something is a magic shield, but the hard truth is that your boundaries mean absolutely nothing when a literal monster is the one holding all the physical power in the room. Stick with me here, because we are watching a trauma bond get hardwired in real time. Dante plays a sick mind game, claiming rival hitmen are on their way to take her out. He flips the script, making this mob look like a protective wolf pack instead of her kidnappers. The craziest part is that it works. She looks up at this terrifying enforcer, and her panic fades. Completely broken down, she finally takes the needle. Dante steps into her space, and even though he is ice cold, his giant shadow suddenly feels like a safe place to hide. This is a terrifying life lesson about human nature. When you are pushed to the absolute limit of fear, your desperate brain will literally trick you into believing the very monster holding your leash is actually your only true savior. Outside, a crazy storm is ripping the sky apart, matching the absolute meltdown happening in Eleanor's brain. She wakes up drowning in a massive silk bed. For 1 second, she hopes it was all just a bad dream. Then reality hits her like a freight train. She sees her cheap work uniform folded next to a mountain of insanely expensive designer clothes. This crime family is straight up burying her in luxury to make her completely dependent on them. A sudden knock makes her jump, and Isabella glides in without asking. The lesson here is totally tragic. Insanely luxurious gifts are usually nothing more than beautiful velvet handcuffs. When a toxic person suddenly dumps unearned wealth on your lap, they are never doing it to be nice. They are just writing a massive check to permanently buy your soul. That fragile energy Isabella had in the car is completely gone. Now she is vibrating with this insane, obsessive mafia energy, desperate to claim the daughter she lost years ago. She flashes a warm smile and straight up calls her Sophia. Eleanor freaks out, pulling the blankets up to her chin like a tiny shield to protect who she really is. But Isabella is so blinded by her twisted grief that she steamrolls right over her. She invades Eleanor's space, petting her hair with a suffocating vibe that is actually just pure, terrifying dominance. Then she drops the ultimate plot twist. The DNA test is a perfect match. The harsh life lesson here? The truth does not always set you free. Sometimes, cold hard facts are the exact weapons toxic people use to completely break your spirit and lock you in a cage forever. Those test results absolutely nuke any hope Eleanor had left about this being a massive misunderstanding. She is brutally forced to realize she shares blood with literal monsters. Total panic short-circuits her brain. She scrambles against the headboard, sobbing and begging to go back to her boring life. But Isabella's face turns to ice. She calmly explains that Alessandro's mafia goons have already wiped her existence off the map. Her apartment? Gone. Her pet? Shipped away. Her old life is straight up deleted. It is a terrifying lesson about human identity. We all think our jobs and daily routines anchor us to reality. But the truly dark truth is, a crime syndicate with enough cash and power can erase your entire history in a single afternoon, permanently turning you into a living ghost without a trace. Let me pause this right here, because you and I are witnessing an absolute masterclass in boss energy. Eleanor is having a total meltdown, screaming her lungs out because her normal life is gone forever. Then, boom, the heavy oak door swings open, and Dante casually strolls in. No yelling, no dramatic villain monologue. He just hits her with this dead, empty stare, rocking a Glock 19 on his hip. He barely whispers for her to quiet down, and the whole room instantly drops to absolute zero. It is wild how an actual apex predator never even has to raise his voice to command the space. The real-life lesson here, guys, is super simple. The loudest person in the room is usually just making noise, but the quiet ones? Those are the people you really need to watch out for. Did you catch how the older matriarch just ghosts out of the frame? She hits Eleanor with her forced new mafia name as this sick psychological flex, giving her exactly 20 minutes to fold before the door clicks shut. Now it is just Dante and Eleanor suffocating in this insane tension. Dante totally stonewalls her. He just stands there, icy as ever, watching her scramble back until she smacks into the mahogany desk. She is hyperventilating, trying to act all tough and claiming she is not a prisoner. But Dante shuts that down instantly, telling her she is nothing but a massive walking hazard. He steps right into her bubble, throwing a giant shadow over her. Look, the takeaway here is brutal but true. Freedom is incredibly fragile, and your control over your life can vanish in literally one heartbeat. Check out this shot right here, because the irony is literally off the charts. Dante has Eleanor pinned against this crusty peeling wallpaper, and you can practically smell the gun oil and bad vibes radiating off him. He drops his voice super low, his pale eyes tracking her racing pulse like a lion watching a deer. He completely shatters her denial, laying out the hardcore facts. One sloppy photo leaked out, and now the rival Greco crime family is locked on her. He makes her realize that just existing is a literal declaration of war. It is crazy how fast things flip. Sometimes, you have to hide behind the very monster that wants to ruin you. The lesson today? Life is not fair, man. Sometimes we end up as total collateral damage in huge, messy battles we never even asked to be a part of. The camera just sits on Eleanor, and you see her face go completely ghost white. the second he drops the Greco name. Dante gets right up in her space, his voice totally dead, and delivers the ultimate gut punch. These are the exact dudes who wiped out her mom. He says they know about the girl with the Moretti locket, giving her maybe 48 hours before it is open season. She is having a total breakdown, begging to run away to Europe. But here's the wildest plot twist. Dante does not snap at her. Instead, this giant hitman gently brushes her jawline with his rough fingers. That one soft touch right in the middle of a horror show totally shorts out her panic. It teaches us something deep. We crave connection so badly, we will literally lean right into the hand that holds the knife. Watching this whole sequence is pure anxiety, guys. Dante is all up in her personal space, his breath hitting her ear as he breaks down how cooked she is. To the Greco family, her head is just a shiny trophy, and to her own Uncle Alejandro, she is nothing but a cheap pawn for his Mafia chess game. Slowly, Dante traces her lip, and his intense dark stare completely locks her down. He tells her straight up that if she runs, he will hunt her down himself. But he totally flips the script, making this an insane hostage situation sound like her only safe zone. Without him backing her, she is gone by Friday. It is wild to think about. But here is the cold, hard truth. A villain can easily become your absolute hero, simply by stepping up and hiding you from a much bigger, much worse monster. Eleanor is caught in the most toxic, mind-bending trap ever. She is staring at the mob muscle, holding her against her will, but her stressed-out brain is out here turning him into her knight in shining armor. That edgy, dangerous vibe he gives off is acting like a total painkiller for her panic. But then, snap, reality hits. He drops the nice guy act and barks at her to get dressed for her uncle, Alejandro, and his creepy mob meeting. Cut to 20 minutes later, she is walking down these massive marble stairs, rocking black cashmere, feeling totally numb inside. And who is lurking exactly in step behind her? Dante. It is a huge wake-up call for anyone paying attention. The heaviest chains we wear are usually the invisible ones. His quiet lurking is the official funeral for her normal life. The camera zooms right in on that silver locket resting on her black sweater. Bro, that is not just shiny jewelry. It is basically a loaded gun pointed right at her family tree. They push through these massive oak doors into her uncle's secret boss room. The air is absolutely thick with cheap cigar smoke and crazy villain energy. Alejandro is standing over a giant map like he is playing Risk, surrounded by 4 heavy-hitter mob captains. The second Eleanor walks in, you could hear a pin drop. These hardened goons just stare, looking back and forth from her face to the family crest. She looks exactly like Katerina came back from the dead. That brings us to a super deep truth about life. You can run as fast as you want, but your family history has a funny way of dragging you right back to the start. Alejandro locks those creepy amber eyes on her, and he is just oozing this gross, toxic pride. He does not even see a scared kid standing there. He is just looking at a shiny mirror reflecting his own massive ego. His raspy voice booms across the room as he officially renames her Sofia Katerina Moretti, stamping her as the heir to his whole underground empire. You can literally see the mob captains stiffen up in their expensive suits. One giant dude in a thick gold chain speaks up, dropping a total bomb. The Greco family is already gearing up for war, and Lorenzo Greco slapped a $5 million bounty on her head. It is a super harsh reality check for all of us. Sometimes, life will just grab you by the collar and force you to play a totally rigged game with cards you never asked for. Stick with me here, guys, because we have to fully unpack this massive mess. The rival gang is coming back to finish a super bloody war they started 2 decades ago. 5 million big ones just to bring her in alive. You can literally see Eleanor gulp down her fear, fully knowing what mob bosses do to living hostages. But Uncle Alejandro? The guy does not even blink. He straight up slams his fist on the desk with this psycho grin on his face. He is actually hyped for the war. He grabs her shoulders and promises a mountain of bosses before anyone lays a finger on her, telling her to ice out her feelings. It brings up a super dark point about survival. When you are stuck in a world completely run by absolute monsters, your only real move is to let the darkness turn you into one of them. Alejandro tells her to stop being scared of the shadows and start using them like a weapon. Right there, in that exact frame, the sweet city girl is officially gone forever. Over the next few brutal weeks, we watch her mind get totally shredded and rebuilt from scratch inside this insane, overly fancy mountain fortress. The whole place is locked down by security goons who care way more about crazy loyalty than a paycheck. She is basically buried alive under expensive silk sheets and cold marble floors. She cannot even peek out a window, and they literally roasted her cell phone on night one. It goes to show how fast a shiny cage can destroy a person. Here is the life lesson. If you strip away every single thing a person loves, you can easily mold their empty shell into a straight-up weapon. Just to mess with her head even more, they hand her this clunky satellite phone that only calls 3 numbers. Because she is so isolated, Dante ends up becoming the absolute main character of her sad little world. He is literally always there. She tries to chill in the giant library, and boom, he is in the corner, taking apart his custom handgun. During super awkward silent dinners, he is just hiding in the shadows, checking the windows for sniper lasers. But then the camera catches this crazy plot twist that melts her brain. This hardcore hitman actually drops down on one knee to help an old maid who has bad joints. It is a huge eye-opener for everyone. People are never just one simple thing, and even the most terrifying bad guys out there can hide a surprisingly soft heart. Even after seeing that tiny soft spot, Dante still keeps Eleanor frozen out behind this massive wall of ice. He tracks her every single move, like a mad scientist waiting for a glass cup to shatter under pressure. And man, that breaking point almost happens down in the depressing underground shooting range. Her uncle is forcing her to run these crazy, tactical shooting drills, hammering home that being weak means ending up in a wooden box. The air is choking them with gunpowder and crazy loud gunshots. Dante gets right up in her ear, talking right through her headphones, totally roasting her for flinching. Suddenly, her brain just quits. She drops the heavy gun, her arms shaking like crazy. The lesson is real. You can only force a soft person to carry the weight of war for so long before they fully snap. You and I really need to look at the raw cruelty in this opening scene. For 2 exhausting hours of brutal training, Eleanor has battered her hands down to torn flesh. She gasps for air, begging for a break as her muscles spasm under the heavy steel. Dante completely ignores her tears, coldly commanding her to lift the weapon again. When she refuses, he steps right behind her, trapping her spine against his solid chest. That sudden intimacy sends a paralyzing shockwave through her nervous system. He forces his calloused palms over her bleeding knuckles, whispering that the rival Mafia will never care about her pain. It shows us a harsh reality we all face. The universe will never pause its chaos just because you need a moment to catch your breath. The camera frames this insane dynamic between captor and captive. Her lethal instructor, smelling of black coffee and peppermint, has inexplicably become her only anchor in this nightmare. Dante refuses to offer soft comfort. He reminds her that rival assassins are ripping through Brooklyn just to find her. If those hitmen breach the gates, they will break her legs and drag her away. The crushing weight of her mortality hits Eleanor at once, forcing a heavy sob from her throat. Dante shuts that panic down instantly. He quietly forbids her tears, treating sadness as a luxury they cannot afford today. He just steadies her bruised hands, absorbing her violent tremors. Sometimes a tough dose of reality is the only true protection a harsh world can actually offer you. Notice how twisted things get when the walls finally close in. Eleanor finds her frantic mind turning this violent mobster into a safe harbor. She forces her lungs to steady, pulls the trigger, and destroys the target. Dante lets out a low grunt of approval, a sound that vibrates straight down her spine. For 5 agonizing seconds, he stays completely frozen. He remains wrapped around her, obsessed with the frantic pulse hammering against her neck. It is a suffocating tension, built on adrenaline, and the toxic reality of a mafia trauma bond. Right as this crazy dependency peaks, the heavy steel door kicks open. Leo bursts inside, his face shining with pure panic. It just proves that we naturally cling to whoever is closest when the ship goes down. Even if that person happens to be a deadly shark. Leo is shaking, his voice cracking with a dread as he announces a total system failure. While their boss plays the clean businessman miles away, the compound alarms have flatlined. Watch how Dante flips the switch here. He instantly buries that dark attachment and reverts to a cold machine. He shoves away from Nina, draws his weapon, and steps right in front of her like a human shield. He barks at Leo, demanding the status of the thermal sensors. When the enforcer admits the wires were sliced from the inside, her body locks into freezing shock. The impenetrable Mafia fortress has officially fallen to the enemy. It reminds us of a bitter piece of wisdom we should never forget. True ruin rarely kicks down your front door, because it usually already holds the keys from the inside. Stick with me, because you and I are going to unpack the exact moment the fortress went dark. Listen to the precision in the hitman's voice. Dante orders Leo to lock Isabella in the panic room and shoot anyone else who tries to enter. He then locks his eyes onto Nina with a terrifying predatory stare, offering a silent promise of extreme violence. He announces he is taking her to the underground vaults, swearing to butcher anyone who dares to follow. What is truly chilling about this scene is the dead silence. There are no blaring sirens. The attackers killed the main power, leaving only the sickly green glow of exit signs in the pitch-black hallway. It proves a haunting point about the world we live in. Real terror never actually announces itself with a warning before it finally strikes. Look at the physical control Dante takes here. He grabs her arm with a grip guaranteed to leave deep bruises, yet it is the only thing keeping her standing. He orders her to step exactly in his footprints, showing the dominance of a man raised in pure violence. As they navigate the freezing concrete maze, her heart hammers so loud she fears the sound will give them away. Suddenly, a muffled gunshot echoes from the floor above, followed by the sickening thud of a body hitting marble. She gasps on instinct. Dante shuts down instantly, clamping his hand over her mouth and pinning her against the wall. He scans the dark, perfectly calm. It is a wild reminder that survival often requires completely silencing your most natural human reactions. They reach the dead end of the tunnel, stopping before a massive steel vault. Dante relies on muscle memory, punching in the code and pressing his thumb to the scanner. You hear the heavy clank of the internal bolt sliding back. It is that agonizing split second where safety is an inch away, but disaster strikes. Heavy boots echo down the concrete hallway. Blinding flashlight beams slice through the dark. A rough voice shouts in Italian, marking their position for the hit squad. Dante does not flinch. His brain cleanly shifts into an icy combat mode. He pushes Nina into the vault to keep her breathing, turning back to face the shadows with his voice raised. It tells us something profound. Real loyalty means standing alone in the doorway, so someone else gets a chance to keep living. The narrow hallway erupts into a terrifying sensory overload. Bright muzzle flashes light up the dark like a strobe light, and the roar of gunfire scrambles her brain. She covers her ears, curling into a ball as hot sparks rain down from bullets tearing into the steel door. Dante operates in a terrifying flow state. He shoots back with the cold precision of a man devoid of fear, dropping 2 hitmen in a heartbeat. As boots pound down the stairs, she screams his name, horrified he will die for her. Instead of playing the tragic martyr, Dante fires twice and throws his massive frame backward. He slams his shoulder into the door, locking it just as his body thuds against the outside. It is a powerful lesson. The bravest thing you can ever do is know exactly when to close the door and survive. Step into the dark with me, right as the steel tumblers click into place. That sound acts as a death sentence, cutting off the chaos outside and leaving a suffocating silence. Listen to the ragged breath pulling through their lungs. Dante's rough voice cuts through the dark, asking if she is hurt. Elelanina frantically checks her arms for holes before asking him the same thing. A sudden click echoes out. Dante points a flashlight at the ceiling, bouncing a soft glow across the room so he does not blind her, a strangely gentle instinct from a killer. The dim light exposes their cage, revealing walls built entirely from stacks of filthy Mafia cash. It proves a terrifying truth we all have to accept. All the stolen wealth in the world cannot buy your way out of a sealed tomb. Dante's massive frame slumps against the freezing vault door. His nervous system violently crashes, begging for a single deep breath. A rhythmic drip of dark blood trails down his left arm, blooming into an ugly crimson stain across his white shirt. Elelanina spots the wound and rushes over to help. Dante tries to play the tough guy, muttering coldly that the bullet missed the main artery. He waves her away, sliding to the icy floor to fight off shock while doing the tactical math out loud. He swears the steel walls can take a blast of C4 explosives, but she ignores his boundaries entirely. Her shaking hands peel the ruined fabric away from his torn flesh. Empathy is a beautifully separate thing in this life. Our drive to heal will always overpower the natural instinct to hide away. Pushing past her shock, Elelanina removes her sweater, shivering in a thin, silk camisole. This flips a dangerous switch inside Dante's brain. His eyes snap open, tracking her bare shoulders as his jaw clenches. His voice drops into a low, territorial growl, but she refuses to back down. Ripping the fabric, she reveals pieces of her tragic past, whispering about patching up bruised foster kids. She projects that deep caregiver instinct onto this lethal Mafia enforcer, crawling into his space to tie the tourniquet. His skin radiates intense heat, his heart pounding, yet he suppresses every flinch. He just sits there, completely paralyzed by a genuinely unselfish touch. It leaves us with a powerful lesson. True vulnerability will always find a way to disarm the toughest armor we wear. Yo, check this out. Dante is literally bleeding out, but does he care? Not even a little bit. He is locked onto Eleanor, watching her absolutely lose it. Homegirl is shaking like a leaf, and he just slowly reaches out. In his brutal, hyper-violent Mafia world, acting soft like this should get him clipped instantly. But locked in this vault, the rules are gone. It is just raw human connection. He wipes a tear with his rough thumb, and she finally cracks, admitting she is terrified. She presses her hands right against his chest, using his heartbeat to stop her own panic attack. You know, it really makes you think. The strongest bonds we ever make are always forged in our darkest moments, far away from anyone else judging us. Let us pause and look at how this total disaster went down. Eleanor thought she was untouchable, right? But Dante completely shatters that vibe. He reveals the entire trap. The sensors bypassed, the wires cut, a flawless inside job. You can literally see the betrayal punch the air out of her lungs. Dante leans on the freezing wall and lists the only 3 guys with keys. Himself, Alejandro, and then he drops the nuke. Sal. Eleanor is cooked. She just stands there, her brain rewinding to a sit-down they had last week, frantically looking for the red flags she entirely missed. Here is the bitter truth about blind trust, guys. The people standing closest to you are the only ones in range to actually slip the knife in your back. The awful puzzle pieces finally snap together in her brain. She remembers Sal, the boss at the docks, who warned Alejandro about this exact hit. Dante confirms it, sounding completely toxic. He does the nightmare math for her. If Sal is teaming up with Lorenzo, the enemy family is actively gutting her family right now. Dante ignores his bleeding arm and pushes himself up. Then comes the massive plot twist that destroys all hope. Alejandro is at a peace summit right now at a fancy hotel, walking straight into a lethal trap set by Sal. Eleanor literally stops breathing. Man, it leaves us with such a brutal lesson. Sometimes, the exact same hand that feeds you is just fattening you up for the slaughter. Trust nobody blindly. Just look at how insane this setup is. The cold light of the vault hits Dante as he paces around like a caged animal. 0 cell service in this metal box. He turns to Eleanor, looking super grim, and drops the reality check. 6 heavily armed dudes are waiting outside to shred them. Dante only cares about keeping her alive. But watch Eleanor flip the switch right here. Her shaking stops completely. She gets super loud and fierce, telling him that if her cousin dies, their whole empire goes up in smoke. She is ready for war. It is crazy how we spend our lives convinced we are weak and fragile. But all that fear completely vanishes the very second we realize we have absolutely nothing left to lose. You have to notice the massive power shift happening right now. The scared, normal girl is totally gone, replaced by the pure venom of her Mafia bloodline. Eleanor gets right in his face, poking a hard finger into the chest of her bodyguard. The lighting shows this intense steel in her eyes. She is not looking at a hired gun anymore. She is looking at her family's ultimate weapon. She orders him to open the door, refusing to let her cousin get jumped. Dante just freezes up. For a cold-blooded guy, seeing her act this ruthless is super fascinating to him. He slowly smiles, watching the monster wake up inside her. You can fake being normal for your entire life, but you can never actually outrun who you are meant to be. Listen to how hyped this moment gets. The heavy click of Dante racking his gun cuts through all the tension. He calls her by her Mafia boss title, telling her to stay low. He hits the scanner, and those giant metal doors finally groan open. He gives her this crazy, intense look, demanding she stays brave. The door swings wide, and the hallway just explodes with blinding muzzle flashes. It is absolute chaos. Dante walks directly into the gunfire like it is nothing. 3 quick shots. 3 guys drop dead on the concrete in a split second. It is a wild scene, but it shows that peace is always just a fake setup. It is a temporary luxury, and you only get it if you are willing to become the darkest monster in the room. Okay, stick with me here, because this next part is pure cinema. Watching Dante clear this hallway is like watching a natural disaster. His aim is so crazy that the enemy body armor is completely useless. The focus stays on Eleanor, showing her absolutely panicking as the air fills with thick gunpowder and the awful smell of blood. Dante just glides forward, literally using his own body to shield her at every blind corner. They make it to the stairwell. And he suddenly freezes, pressing his back hard against the concrete. You can hear heavy boots stomping down the stairs above them. Honestly, no matter how fast you try to run away from a bad situation, there is always another huge problem waiting for you at the next level. You can practically feel the insane tension rolling off Dante right now. The harsh light hits his clenched jaw as he realizes he is completely trapped. He is down to just 3 bullets. He aggressively tells Eleanor to run for the exit and never look back, basically using psychology to stop her from freezing up. In a total blur, he spins and shoots up the stairs. One guy takes a tumble, but the next shooter already has the high ground. A massive shotgun blast absolutely wrecks the quiet, blowing the wall next to Dante into pieces. A chunk of rock slices his cheek wide open. You can be the smartest planner on earth and calculate every single detail perfectly, but pure, unfiltered chaos will always get the last word. The crazy impact of that blast sends Dante stumbling, and he drops his gun, sliding across the filthy floor. The hitman steps into the light, pointing his barrel right at Dante. Time literally stops. Eleanor sees Dante trying to grab his knife, but his bleeding hands are just way too slow. The bad guy tightens his finger on the trigger. Eleanor does not even scream. All her panic just burns away into pure adrenaline. That sweet, innocent girl is officially gone. She dives across the dirty floor, grabbing the heavy, bloody pistol Dante dropped. When life backs you into the worst possible corner, you quickly find out exactly what kind of ruthless, hardcore survivor was hiding inside of you the entire time. The camera just focuses on her gripping that massive steel pistol. She is not freaking out at all. There is no crying or moral panic. Her brain just flashes back to her training, remembering exactly what to do. Breathe in, hold it, squeeze. She actually pulls the trigger. The brutal kickback shakes her whole body as the loud bang echoes everywhere. The hitman goes flying backward into the dark. Afterward, the silence just hits her like a truck. Her ears are ringing so loud she cannot hear a thing, staring at the smoke coming out of her gun. We all like to act super tough and pretend we have these firm moral lines. But if you force someone to protect the people they care about, they will cross that line without hesitating. The sheer trauma of catching a body almost breaks her brain on the spot. Her vision is literally fading to black. But then Dante slides back into the scene. He kneels right next to her, completely ignoring the dead guy, and gently peels the gun out of her frozen hands. He stares into her eyes with this insane, quiet obsession. He demands she look at him. Guys, this is exactly how someone gets totally brainwashed. He wipes the gunpowder off her cheek and whispers that she did great, spinning a brutal murder into this romantic act of loyalty. It is a huge warning label for real life. Sometimes the person saving you from the dark is the exact same toxic person dragging you straight down into hell. Dante refuses to let her spiral into guilt. He snaps her back to reality, reminding her that her cousin is literally running out of time. They rush into the dark underground garage. Dante ignores all the flashy sports cars and heads straight for this massive, armored black SUV. He throws her inside and turns the key. The engine roars, and without even waiting, he floors the gas pedal, absolutely smashing through the heavy wooden garage doors in a huge shower of splinters. They fly out into a massive midnight rainstorm. The whole drive is just a wild blur of neon lights and screaming tires. Listen, sometimes the only way to survive a devastating storm in life is to become the most dangerous force out there. Picture this. Dante is tearing across a slick bridge at over 100 miles an hour, bleeding through a makeshift bandage. His face is ice cold. Eleanor is right there in the passenger seat, bathed in the creepy green dashboard glow, staring at the dried blood on his hands. Here is the ultimate plot twist, guys. She knows he is a ruthless hitman. But after the chaos they just survived, she looks at him and completely accepts it. He is her nightmare now. Dante finally breaks the dead silence and drops a massive reality check. He tells her they are driving straight into a literal firing squad. Honestly, love is a completely terrifying thing. It will have you willingly riding shotgun into a blazing war zone, just so you do not have to face the end all by yourself. Let us unpack the insane psychology happening right now. Eleanor looks back and says they shoot first. Her voice is dead calm, zero shaking. That fragile girl who used to jump at shadows is gone. She has fully swallowed the toxic legacy of her criminal family. Dante shoots her a proud smirk because he knows she just crossed the point of no return. They pull up to this wildly expensive hotel that is about to become a high-end graveyard. Dante violently slams the brakes and marches past the terrified kitchen staff like a hungry wolf, strolling through a flock of clueless sheep. It is a tragic irony that hits hard. The exact monsters we spend our entire lives running away from are usually the very people we turn into when our own survival is on the line. Dante tells her to stay low when the doors open, rolling his shoulders. His cold eyes are doing the violent math needed to wipe out this syndicate. Then the elevator chimes. It is a polite, normal sound, ringing out like a sick joke right before the absolute slaughter begins. The doors slide open to reveal two massive, clueless guards. Dante does not even blink once. Two sharp cracks echo through the hall, and both bodies drop instantly. Now, look closely at the real tragedy of this scene. Eleanor literally steps right over these bleeding men without glancing down. Her empathy is completely shut off. It is a brutal wake-up call about human nature. Real survival rarely leaves you with clean hands, no matter how hard you try to scrub off the dark stains later. Come with me into this room. You can practically feel the oxygen getting sucked right out of your lungs. The big boss, Alejandro, sits at the head of the table like he holds the universe in his hands. His guards are bleeding out behind him, but he is completely unbothered. Across from him is Seleucus, a traitor drowning in cold sweat, clinging to that pathetic, fake confidence people only get right before they die. 4 heavy guns are pointed straight at the boss, while Seleucus whines and begs him to give up. Through all this insane noise, Alejandro does not even blink. His pulse stays perfectly flat. The lesson here is as old as time. Out in the brutal wilderness of life, The person who surrenders to panic is always the first one to fall. Apex predators never rush their moves. Alejandro locks eyes with the traitor, and his dead stare strips the guy down to his absolute core. He looks at Seleucus like he is already a ghost. He asks if a new master would ever let a rat live, pointing out that a dog who bites one hand will definitely bite the next. Seleucus lets out a broken laugh because the terrifying reality of those words just clicked in his brain. He opens his mouth to order the hit, but suddenly, the massive oak doors explode inward like a rain of splinters. Dante rips into the room like a literal hurricane of lead. No boring villain speeches, just pure blinding speed. This scene drops a massive truth bomb on us. Loyalty bought with fear always comes with a really fast expiration date, but genuine violence never hesitates for a single second. Let us freeze this frame right here and appreciate the absolute poetry of this takedown. Dante drops the first two gunmen before the broken doors even hit the carpet. A third guy tries to pivot his weapon, but a massive crack echoes from the hallway. It is Eleanor. Standing in the wreckage, choking on gun smoke, she completely shatters his shoulder. Then Dante casually puts a bullet right between the eyes of the final guard. 4 insane seconds. That is all it took to flip the underworld upside down. Seleucus is paralyzed, his face turning the color of dirty snow. He is trapped, staring down the boss, the attack dog, and the brand new monster they created. Here is a timeless lesson. The monsters we build with our own 2 hands are always the ones destined to burn our empires to the ground. The gunfire stops ringing. Alejandro stands up with elegant grace, fixing his cuffs like a massacre is just a minor delay. He pours a drink while the room reeks of burnt powder. He takes a sip and tells the traitor that he missed. Seleucus breaks down, crying and swearing he had no choice. Alejandro does not even flinch. Tears mean nothing to a guy with no soul. Instead, the boss steps over the carnage to stare at his daughter. Seeing the blood on her clothes and the smoking gun in her hand, his eyes are filled with this twisted, proud energy. It is a haunting reality check. Sometimes, the people who claim to love us the most really only love the dark, broken versions of themselves that they force us to turn into. Alejandro glares through the dust and tells Dante that he survived. The enforcer stares at the crying traitor, casually joking that their enemies just did not pack enough heat. The boss steps right up to the rat, spelling out his final judgment incredibly slowly. He says the guy messed up by bringing rats into his sanctuary. With sick elegance, the kingpin pulls out a pearl-handled revolver, whispers a dark goodbye, and pulls the trigger. The traitor drops dead on the bloody tiles. Alejandro puts the gun away, turns to Eleanor, and gently brushes a silver chain against her collarbone. Guys, it is a massive truth we love to ignore. The absolute cruelest hands in the world can look incredibly gentle, right up until the exact moment they lock you inside a cage forever. With a few heavy words, Alejandro completely deletes her old life. He tells her she is no longer a civilian, sounding like a judge reading a death sentence. He renames her Sofia Moretti, promising the whole city will shake when they hear it. His eyes lock onto Dante, making a massive unspoken deal. Dante steps up, wraps his scarred hand around her waist, and pulls her tight against his chest. He is literally claiming her soul, while her dad just watches. Eleanor gives in, leaning into the warmth of the exact killer, who ruined her normal life. It is a heartbreaking visual, but it teaches us something crazy about trauma. When your entire world is burned down to ash, you will willingly hug the monster who struck the match, just so you do not freeze in the dark alone. Stick with me here. You and I have to accept that the innocent girl from the start of the story is gone forever. She walked into this nightmare as a terrified waitress, but now, the toxic mafia blood in her veins has completely taken over. We are looking at a brand new underworld queen, standing shoulder to shoulder with apex predators. She is bonded to Dante through shared trauma, violence, and broken loyalty. Together, they are ready to watch the entire city burn. This tragic setup leaves us with one massive reality check. You can change your name and try to hide, but you can never outrun your own shadow. When you bury your demons instead of facing them, they do not die. They just wait in the dark, getting hungrier, until they finally tear out and eat you alive.
By the end of the story, Eleanor is no longer simply Eleanor Harding, the overworked waitress trying to survive in Queens. She becomes Sophia Caterina Moretti, a woman connected to power, legacy, and danger. But the educational lesson is that power itself is not enough. Power without responsibility becomes destruction. Alessandro has power, Dante has violence, Isabella has family authority, and the Greco syndicate has fear. Yet the story asks an important question. What should power be used for? The Grecos use power to hunt, intimidate, and finish old blood feuds. For Sala, power is power to be. Alessandro uses power to protect family, though so sometimes in controlling ways. Dante uses power as a shield, standing between Eleanor and the people who want to hurt her. Eleanor's growth is meaningful because she begins to understand that power is not only about being feared, it is about choosing when to stand, when to fight, and what kind of person to become after survival. Her final declaration that Lorenzo Grego they can try shows that she has stopped seeing herself as prey. However, the deeper lesson is not that she becomes ruthless, it is that she becomes responsible for her own name. She can no longer live invisibly, but she also cannot let others define what being a Moretti means. Educationally, this is a strong message for viewers. Status, money, family name, or influence do not automatically make someone admirable. What matters is how that power is used. Does it protect the vulnerable or exploit them? Does it create safety or fear? Does it build courage or demand obedience? Eleanor's journey teaches that real strength is not simply inheriting a throne. Real strength is learning to carry power without losing humanity, dignity, or the memory of who you were before the world knew your name.